Okay, so yeah, tell us when the Derby, how it came about, and when it started to really seep into the consciousness of Britain.
Right. Well, the first Derby was 1780, but it was brought about first of all by the Oaks. In those days, all the races were over 2 miles or 4 mile heats, and they took a long time. The whole afternoon there'd only be 6 horses who would keep running against each other. So Lord Derby was a steward at Epsom, and he had a party, and they decided to have the Oaks in 1779 as a straight race, one race over 1.5 miles for fillies. It was such a success, and Lord Derby won it. So the next year they said, well, why don't we have one for colts and fillies? So they decided they would, and they didn't know what to call it. There was Sir Charles Bunbury, who was like head of the Jockey Club, he was there, and Lord Derby, and they said, no, you have it after you, and vice versa. Let's spin a coin. So they spun a coin, Lord Derby won it, and Bunbury won the first Derby with Diomed. So it was a fairy tale opening, you know. The starts have varied. They've had them in the dip and further up. At one time, there were so many full starts, 29 were recorded on one occasion, out of sight of the grandstand. So there was a lot of fiddling, and people would enter horses with no chance just to upset the favourite a little bit, then they'd lay the favourite, you know. I should think by about 1820 to 1830, it got to be the Londoners' day out. The Duke of York was there, and he was a great lover of bare-knuckle boxing, and there was bare-knuckle boxing. It was illegal, but they would hide it behind a tent, and they'd pass the word round, and a couple of bookmakers would go over, and they'd have a great time. And there was roulette in the tents, and oceans of beer, and 5-card tricks, and, you know, thimbles under peas under thimbles, that sort of thing. So that was the setup. And amid all that, a local printer called Dorling had the first race card, which was called Dorling's Correct Card. It was in effect a sheet of paper, and it had all the runners on, that sort of thing. So it was travelling to the Derby was a big thing, because there were no cars in the early days, and they used to go by horse-drawn vehicles, and they'd come out of London, and the road would be lined, the dust from the road, and of course horses would collapse in the shafts in the middle of the road. They'd have to be harnessed and dragged to the side of the road. It wasn't pretty. And that last 1.5 miles uphill from the Spread Eagle, which was the Spread Eagle is a pub at the bottom of the hill at Epsom. That was the last stop to water the horses, and for someone to have another pint of beer who was driving them, you know. And then, of course, it wasn't a really well made up road. It was muddy, and in the winter you get water running down, and it depended if it had been good weather before the Derby, you know, it was quite a struggle to get up the hill. Particularly, you might have 6 or 7 in the coach and horses, you know. It wasn't pretty, you know. But
tell us about 1912. You know, what are your well, not your memories, but what do you know about this? A bizarre winner, wasn't it? Really, sort of ticked a few boxes that haven't been ticked often in Derby history.
Yeah. Well, it was a filly. It was Tegale, and she'd won the 1,000 guineas. She was grey. She'd won the 1,000 guineas at 20-1, and wasn't really thought of as having a major chance for the Derby. She won it. She was 100-8, which is 12.5-1 for those who are not good at maths. And
so tell us about the jockey. Very interesting.
Well, he was known as Knickerbocker Reef, and he came over from America, where horse racing by this time was illegal. Amazing. The horses came over, the jockeys came over, and he was very popular with the ladies. He was like a little boy. They would set him on their knee, these big women. They loved him. And he was just 4 foot high, and he weighed 5 stone. And so you can see he could be passed around at a party with a great deal of fun.
What year? 1913. Emily Davison, is that almost the most notorious, if that's the right word, event at the Derby?
It's the one that people focus on who are coming in from a non-horse racing background, you know. Emily Davison was a suffragette, and she'd been to prison several times. You know, these suffragettes, they weren't popular either with the police or the general public. You know, they'd throw bombs, they'd set light to a newspaper and stick it in a letterbox. Their cause was great, but how they went about it was alarming. You know, in the end they were force-fed, chained to railings, you know. Emily Davison, it's a strange thing. I think that luck played a big part in this for the cause. She bought a return ticket because she had things to do later that day and later on in the week. And she boarded at Victoria, and she wrapped up 2 suffragette flags and stuffed them down the back of her skirt and up a jumper at the back. Presumably she was going to wave them in some sort of demonstration. But when she was on the course, she was about 10 rows from the front. She started, you know, there was no commentary, so you don't know when the horses are coming. You hear from the crowd, here they come on, you know, that sort of thing. Half the field had passed before she got down to the running rail. There would be nothing to stop you going under the rail and onto the course. She missed the first few. She got out there. The horse, I've looked at this, by the way, frame by frame, so I'm quite familiar with it. She tries to snatch one horse and he goes past her. The next horse sidesteps her. And then there's only about 3 or 4 left. Another horse comes up, which she puts her hands to grab the reins, the bridle, either side of the thing. And it just so happens it's Amner, the king's horse, and he bowls her over like a hoop, bang, like that. The horse go down, the jockey go down. She's taken in an ambulance up the course. She dies in Epsom Cottage Hospital 4 days later of a broken neck at the end, at the top of the spine. The jockey cracks a rib, but the ambulance is gone, and he's pushed up the course on a stretcher with bicycle wheels on either side and attended to, because he couldn't get the stretcher with the bicycle wheels into the first aid room, he was seen in the winner's enclosure. And the horse had a scratch, but he was all right, and he ran a few weeks later at Goodwood. But he wasn't expected to win. He was a bit of a long shot. And the king just liked to have a runner, I think, there, you know.
Just tell us your memories as a kid or older going to the Derby, not so much about the racing, but as you sort of touched on earlier, what were all the side fares and what was going on?
Well, it was quite incredible. I first went in the late 40s. And you'd get there and there was just so much happening. There was a fair at Tattenham Corner, and then there was a fair the other side of the road. But sooner or later, someone would stand up and there'd be a circle of people around them. And I'd seen escapologists who would be put in a straitjacket with a hood over the top and chains around their neck and around their legs, you know, and the wife would go round holding a tin can for all the sixpences afterwards, when amazingly he would get out, usually after about 5 or 6 minutes longer than you'd think, so you think he died in there. And there were sword swallowers, flame eaters, there were black and white minstrel shows, there were bare knuckle boxing, there were strippers, there were thimble riggers, you know, with Find the Lady and all that sort of thing. But amazingly, there was a good selection of real ales and meat pies. So if you avoided losing your money on the 3-card trick, you could have quite a good time.
So, was it almost like a public holiday?
It was, yeah. At one time, it was a public holiday from Parliament, but that was in the late 1800s. But I mean, usually everybody said it was their grandmother's funeral, and I know a friend of mine just ran out of grandmothers.
Did it get feisty? Were there fights? Is it?
Yeah, well, there were pickpockets, always pickpockets. There were fights towards the end of the afternoon. Someone lost their money, someone had gone off with a girlfriend, you know. I've seen that sort of thing. But I didn't see any knife fights or anything.
Did you get
like
sort of like a cross-section of society there?
Absolutely, yeah. They said it was from the dukes to the dustmen who all used to get together up to the race, and after it was all over they went back to their classes.
That's lovely. Okay, so I think that ticks most of those boxes. So when do you think it started to lose its mass appeal? You know, it was such an event, wasn't it? But sadly, it's sort of gone out of the consciousness a little bit. What do you
think? First of all, it's fair to say that from 1912 right up to 1950, horse racing was the country's national pastime, with football and cricket a distant second and third. The working classes backed horses. You know, they drank, smoked, backed horses, and if they had any money left over, they bought food. It was that high on their list. The racing was rather funny because there were no commentary. The race cars had the bare minimum of information. There were no tannoy system, so you had to wait till the numbers went up in the frame. And if there was a steward's inquiry or objection, they had a number of coloured flags, white, red and blue. So you were really in the dark. I can remember being down at the 2 furlong pole in 1952, and nobody knew the result for about 20 minutes afterwards. It was just madness, you know. But it lost it once. I mean, a lot of things happened. There were betting shops in 1960. Before that, you had to be on the course legally to bet, but everybody used to bet with either the hairdresser or the publican or the milkman, and an army of bookies runners. I myself was a bookies runner and was the school bookmaker at the age of 11. So, I mean, you know, I was never locked up for it. In fact, the headmaster, who caned me regularly for taking bets in the playground, the day before the derby gave me 2 florins to put each way on Faubourg.
Did it win?
No, it was third. Yeah.
That's lovely. Brilliant stories. Okay, so that's that. Shergar, the greatest horse?
No, the greatest distance.
One of the great mysteries. Will the mystery ever be solved? And I suppose that's part of the beauty of the Derby, isn't it? And the history and the fabric of the Derby.
Well, I think it has been solved. It has been solved. He was kidnapped. Shergar was kidnapped in Ireland by the IRA, thinking that they could get a lot of money to spend on arms. They thought it was owned by the Aga Khan, but of course he was kidnapped a couple of years after he won the Derby, by which time the horse had been syndicated to 40 people who each had, who was each expecting a colt every year from it. And as a result, they could get no signed agreement. And I think they wanted 10 million, and it soon went down to 40,000 or something like that when they realised they weren't getting anything. Nothing happened. The horse won. There's all sorts of stories, but he was obviously killed and dispatched in small parcels somewhere or other, quite sadly. And there's been films of him, but I don't know that those are necessarily the truth, you know. He was by great nephew who wasn't a great sire, so I don't think it was the loss to the thoroughbred mating world as one would have expected. He was a good horse on his day, but he beat a substandard field, and it's nice he's in the record books as having won by 10 lengths.
Now this Derby maybe be a little bit special because the Queen is such a great supporter, and the royal family have been a great supporter of this event down through the centuries. How important is she? How connected is she in the royal family with the Derby, and the fact this is the Jubilee this weekend as well?
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful that this is her first public appearance, so to speak, in the Jubilee. She's owned horses for a long time. At her coronation, on the Saturday after her coronation, when she had she'd bestowed a knighthood on Gordon Richards. So he was Sir Gordon Richards. He won on Pinser and she was second on Oriel. She's been every year since, apart from the 2 years that coincided with anniversaries of D-Day. That was the 40th anniversary in 1984 and the 60th anniversary in 2004. She's been there every year since over that period. She's had 10 runners. She had a second on her first year as Queen, which was Oriel, and then last year she had Carlton House, who was third. So she's a good supporter, and it raises the profile of horse racing. We're very lucky to have her. Edward VII was the previous strong supporter of racing over a number of years. He had 2 winners as the Prince of Wales and 1 winner as King Edward VII.
Has she got a runner on Saturday?
No, she hasn't. No. But she's been having winners. She had a 16-1 winner and a 33-1 winner the other day. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, and I think sort of finally, looking ahead, where do you see the Derby in 20, 30, 40 years time?
It's quite important, isn't it? I had not really thought about it. Epsom are doing a grand job in keeping, they've replaced the stand with the Queen's stand. They've got the Duchess stand opened by the Duchess of Cornwall. The course is in lovely order and everything. And they had pop concerts. I went to the Debbie Harry and Blondie concerts and met the band last year. That was great. They had 13,000 stayed for that. So, I mean, it's quite good. It's quite good. Also, this year is quite interesting because the favourite Camelot is trained by Aidan O'Brien and ridden by his son Joseph. If they win, it'll be the first time that a father-son relationship trainer-jockey has won the Derby, despite the fact, because I had to look this up for Epsom, that there are 9 occasions where the surname of the jockey is the same as the trainer. So we had to go through, a lot of them were just brothers in big families, all about 4'6", But if it happens this time, and it could do, it'll be a landmark. It'll be very nice for Aidan O'Brien and his son.